to see for yourselves one of the most amazing events.
When is this great experiment made?
Impervious to heat, impossible to move.
Is it human or inhuman?
Gentlemen, do you realize what we've found?
It's time for the Geeky Brummie podcast.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Well, hello and welcome to a crossover show here. So, everyone who listens, this is Kirk, and this is from the Kapt Kirk Vinyl Frontier, an all-vinyl show where we just play back-to-back music, and normally there's minimal talking and lots of tunes. But this week, slightly different, because I have sat next to me.
Hello, it's Ryan Parrish here from the Geeky Brummie Show. I lead a pack of geeks every week, and we discuss random stuff, basically. Mainly around film, TV, well, the premiere film show in Birmingham. But usually, my usual compadres are here. Mr. Keith Bloomfield.
Hello, Ryan and Kirk.
Mr. Guy Halford.
Hello.
Halford.
I can't believe I'm back on the air with Kirk as well.
It's
been a long time.
Oh no! Oh,
Guy
it's going to be a
used to
special moment.
Yeah, Guy used to be the producer for the Vinyl Frontier as well. And joining us, Mr. Lee Price. Welcome.
Hello.
So, what's today's show all about, Kirk?
We are going to be doing a review, catch-up, thoughts of music from the last decade. We're going to go through the vibes, what's the style of music, we've got all our favourite albums, and the whole thing is going to be led by Guy. You are the kind of chief whip of today. You're keeping us all ticking along, keeping us in line. And, yeah, we're just going to roll, aren't we? Guy, do you want to kick off? Do you know what's going down, mate?
The leader of the common people.
Well, you know. Yes, I thought first we would talk about like some significant events of the decade in terms of music. So I've got a little list here. There's been loads, but I picked out a few which I actually cared about, which were good discussion points, you know. Okay. So the first one, the big one, this, to be honest with you, looking at the list here, is really the only positive one here, I think. There might be a second positive one, but vinyl boom. Vinyl came back. Vinyl was huge again. Vinyl isn't going away for some time. That's a great thing. I think, you know, Kirk, as a vinyl lover, you've embraced the boom as much as I have. It's been great for us, and it's been disadvantaged to us as well, you know, in terms of some of the pricing. Yeah,
because vinyl's now back, it's now expensive again.
Yeah.
So if you're doing second-hand crate digging, what used to be £1 is probably now a tenner. But it's nice to see, I don't know, gatefold album covers, nice to see brand new bands being able to release their material and being able to choose a good album cover, getting a decent piece of artwork. It's cool, and keeping the independent shops ticking as well. A lot of them are closing, and now they're booming.
Yeah, I think it's just good. It's good that it's got this. The physical format is still there. There's still a demand for it.
Do you think this has been driven by stuff like Record Store Day, though, getting it back out into the wider audience, going for an analogue method, rather than, I think, because the CD industry is pretty much dying off quite a lot now, because it's all online streaming, whereas with an analogue vinyl record, you're going to get a more authentic sound over a CD.
I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say Record Store Day drives it, but I think it kind of helps and it hinders it a little bit, because obviously it takes a bit of a prominence, more prominence than it should, and obviously it backs up some of the pressing of the records. At the same time, it is raising awareness of it. So, you know, it's been a good thing and it's been a bad thing in a way, but I think that I think it helps a bit. I think just the fact no one can. Digital media, it doesn't appeal to everybody. Yeah,
it's in line with the book boom as well. I think people are starting to get a bit more tangible, and I think that's kind of what's driving it. So we've all really massively embraced online, digital music, reading, watching films, whereas now there seems to be, everyone kind of wants to own a book again. A few people want to own records again. So I think it's cool. We're getting back to basics.
Keith, you've started collecting vinyl a bit again. I've noticed you've sort of gone back to it. As someone who predominantly bought vinyl in your youth, there you go, I'm saying you're old and you were around for the original vinyl bit.
Yeah, I didn't have any choice when I was younger, so vinyl was the only thing. So
about 8-track?
Hey, I am that old, but I didn't have any. Okay, let's not go there. No, I kind of like that it's coming back in a way. Like Kirk was saying, there's something about that physical format, that large scale, tangible, nice artwork, good sleeve notes thing, that gatefold albums that I love, because CDs just never really did that. You know, that was lost on the scale of it. I think Record Store Day has its pros and cons. It does kind of raise awareness for it, but that just becomes a collector's day, and everybody's going out to scalp the albums they can then sell 2 hours later on eBay for 6 times the value.
Stop putting the finger on it.
I'd like us to get to a point where vinyl is the same price as CD. So you have the choice to go vinyl or go CD or go streaming, because there's not a great deal of difference in pricing between streaming and CD at the moment, as far as I can tell. Some albums come out exclusively streaming that you just can't buy in a physical format. A lot of movie soundtracks are definitely going that way, that they're just only available online. So I think if they can get the pricing right, and with the guy who's now bought HMV being very predominantly on the side of vinyl, I'd like to see that be how the market in the UK goes, that vinyl and CD and streaming become equally kind of similar pricing, so you have that choice. And I do kind of like a lot of CDs now and DVDs and records come with a digital copy, so you can buy a physical media and still have one that you can take out and about with you.
Lee, what about you? Have you embraced it, or are you still unsure?
So I am the exact opposite. I have heavily embraced digital streaming in the sense that I'm a playlist person. I find it really hard to sit and listen to a full album. I'm the sort of person who has to throw loads of different things into a playlist, and that's usually how I listen to music.
I think that's how most people consume music these days, though. They just want what they like, and they don't want to embrace what's average. They just want the highlights.
But at the same time, I do really think it's cool that vinyl is so huge. You know, I've noticed how vinyl is popping up in shops more and more, and it's getting more shelf space, and I think it's great. And like you said, it's supporting like the independent stores, and seeing those thrive more off the back of it is great too. Because I think there's, like Keith's saying, you know, having all of these things in one place and having the options there is good. And I think, as someone who kind of likes a lot of like DJ culture and stuff as well, I appreciate the vinyl thing coming back for that as well too. So
I think it's this case of ownership. I mean, when you own a record, it is your personal physical copy. When it's a digital download, I mean, there's been cases where companies have lost licenses and music's been taken off. I mean, we've seen it in the past with someone like Taylor Swift, who's taken all the music off Spotify because she doesn't want to. That doesn't get enough licensing payment, so it's kind of, you're at risk of losing an entire back catalogue because of somebody else's decision with a digital method. That's
something I've noticed, because I love using Spotify, but the amount of times where I've wanted to add certain things to a playlist and the album's just not there, and then it'll be back again in a week, but like frequently you'll see these albums appear and disappear and I don't know why, and that's, I think, one of the major problems with digital streaming. But
I think the other thing I like about vinyl is it helps me plan for a post-apocalyptic world. Because when there's no internet and no streaming, I know with a cone of paper, a pin, and some way of revolving something, I can play a record.
Can we listen to the ink spots on repeat?
So do we think, just briefly on this now, going into the next decade, vinyl's going to carry on booming, or do you think it's going to hit a slump now? I think has it hit its high point and it's going to slump over the next decade?
I think the industry has forked, where you'll have people who prefer digital-only methodology and not owning stuff and not having the space to own stuff, and then you'll have people who appreciate and want a physical object, exactly the same as you mentioned with books. You either want the physical object and that sense of ownership and that sense of collecting, which comes with a lot of vinyl, or you want digital, not, or a combination of both. So I think that's where it lives.
Alright, let's move on to some of the others on the list then. So, release dates got moved to Fridays in 2015. I thought that was pointless.
It was for the building up for the charts, wasn't it? More than anything else.
But I just didn't... Monday was always traditionally your new release day. You pop into town that Monday, go and get your new release album. Fridays doesn't seem right to me. Why? I don't understand the reasons for the change. You right there, Ryan?
Ryan is so offended by this. He can't even talk now.
I feel like it was an unnecessary change.
I think it was more for the record industry to basically say, get an extra weekend's worth of sales into the charts, and then...
But you still would have got that weekend, though.
But when do people mostly go shopping?
True. But then
your weekend, which is where they're trying to say it's in stores now, give you that extra promotion for 2 days.
But was it the physical release that made the change, or was it because of the streaming services? Because things like Spotify and stuff, I think for a Friday, that's their big market. End of the weekend, everybody's coming to the streaming thing. So I think it might be more to do with the digital streaming services. That's when they get their biggest kind of audience rather than the physical buyers.
I think it might have been a refocus as well. So I'd actually forgotten that new releases were on a Monday, and then when they said it's now on a Friday, I started checking on a Friday. So I think it might have just prompted that a bit as well.
So on the streaming vibe, a couple more about streaming here then. U2 forced themselves onto people's iPods back in 2014.
I forgot this was a thing. I immediately remember deleting it off of his iPod within 30 seconds
Well, I can't even remember
hearing the news.
I can't even remember what the album was called, but they did something where if you were an owner of an Apple product, you would have woken up to having a U2 album there, like waking up having Bono and The Edge in bed next to you and thinking, what the hell has happened?
I'm just glad that the iPod that I had at that point was so out of date it didn't get that U2 album.
I like that my girlfriend's sister found it on there, started listening to it, and actually ended up slightly liking it when she's not a U2 fan.
It says everything about U2 where they can offer an album for free and everyone's like, no, I want to give that back.
What were they trying to prove with that? Like, what was the purpose of that? Because there's been a lot of like revolutionary moves in terms of like how people have released music in the last decade. Obviously, it's following the Radiohead model from the following decade, like Beyonce, like dropping a HBO special and an album, then Frank Ocean releasing a visual album to get out of his record contract so he could release his album. People have done it in great ways, but what was great? Was this great, or was it just literally stupid?
I think the main reason is that Bono is so full of himself that he thinks everyone's in love with him, and that's why it happened.
I think it was one of the biggest egregious examples of corporatism that we've seen, where Apple have made this decision for everybody that you will have this YouTube album and you will like it and listen to it. You don't have a choice. And Mr. Bono can go and sit on his throne of money again.
The backlash was huge, wasn't it? It was possibly one of the worst marketing kind of ploys, apart from getting U2 in the news, which I suppose is a positive from their point of view. That everyone was just like, I do not want this, I do not want music forced upon me in this way. But then, which it's now what Spotify do, if you play an album or a few tracks, Spotify will then decide what you're now going to listen to.
Well, at least you can turn that off.
Oh, can you? I wasn't aware of that.
Well, we had that thing a few months ago, where Drake took over Spotify for a week, and every single playlist had Drake's face on it. And I was like, I opened up the app and closed the app, and I went to listen to Amazon Music because it annoyed me that much. I think it's where something so emotional and personal as music was thrust upon you, where you don't have a choice if you like this album or not. I think that's what caused such an emotional backlash, because it's kind of, even U2 fans were probably ignoring the album.
As one of those people, I am a U2 fan. I don't mind admitting it, because when they first started
Get out of my house.
in the late 70s, when they were a group of angry young boys from Ireland, it was quite good. I think it was over-egged in terms of actually what happened. It wasn't the fact that everybody was forced to have this album. It was made as an available download for you to download to your device. There was an element of choice in it. It wasn't that you literally did wake up with it forced onto you.
No, it was a forced download. It was a forced download.
Yeah. It was.
Because it took me ages to find it. I didn't find it on my device when I went. I was like, I haven't got it. So why didn't I get it?
People actually were like, I want my U2 album.
I want my free U2 album. But it was a thing where they thought, this is, we'll do a thing to show how easy it is for people to get new music straight away. It was just a bad marketing idea, and it got blown out of proportion, I think, really, in terms of what it was. I mean, it could have been worse. It could have been, an Agadoo album or something, Black Lace or something.
Talking about a huge musical arrogance of the decade, the launch of Tidal.
I was hoping you was going to pick up this
one. The launch of Tidal.
I understand the thought behind it, which was where artists don't really get a vast sum of money from streaming services. That's why a lot of bands that you would have seen from the 70s and 80s have now gone back on tour, because people aren't buying their albums anymore. They're streaming them, so the only way they can earn money is to go out and still play in their 60s and 70s and get funding that way. But the absolute arrogance, as you mentioned, of Jay-Z and thinking, oh, because it's lossless, people are going to pay 3 times the price of Spotify.
And also the fact that people only listen to their music through their phones on a packed bus at full volume. I don't think the increasing quality was really being picked up by that.
Yeah.
I think with that as well, like, it was such a limited selection. It was just that small group of artists, and it's like you're paying more to access fewer artists than you would on Spotify, which is like practically everyone except Taylor Swift.
Yeah. I like.
Didn't you have like Kanye was exclusively releasing The Life of Pablo on Tidal?
And then continuously updating The Life of Pablo.
Yeah. And then it was like a few months later, it's like it's on Spotify now.
Still to be updated.
Yeah.
I think Tidal is another example of that. The problem with streaming and the fact that there's so many different services fighting for everybody's money, and where do artists put their product in order to make the best from it? Because if you've got Apple Music, you've got Amazon Music, you've got Spotify, you've got Deezer,
Pandora
you've got
in the States, which has never come to the Europe.
Yeah.
Spotify's already tied up everybody.
So it's kind of like you can appreciate that people would try to tie up a market so they can release product that gets the best for their artists. But when they're fighting against kind of, you know, mega corporations that are just hoovering everything up, it is tricky.
Which I loved as well is when they had the big initial announcement meeting. It was like literally like, oh look, it looks like they're going to do a Band-Aid single. It was appalling.
Who was it? It was Jay-Z, Beyonce, Kanye, Daft Punk.
I think Arcade Fire showed up. It was Jack White was involved somehow. It was.
I think they were trying to use the model from, I think it was in the 70s when you had United Artists, and they tried to do labels and films for artists, so they had complete control of their music. But this felt very much financially based. Give us more money.
It felt like Jay-Z was like, I'm a billionaire and it's not enough. Give me all your streaming money.
I think so. I mean, obviously there's a lot of discussion from that about like what artists make from streaming, but it was the wrong way to go about it. And I think we saw a better example more recently where Taylor Swift has renegotiated what she makes from Spotify and has put her music back up. And I think that is what artists should be doing more of, and trying to push for their fair share a bit more, rather than just going like, well, we'll take our music away and put it on this own our other thing.
I disagree with that, because people like Taylor Swift are at the zenith of their career and they're earning enough. What she should be doing is negotiating for all people.
Well, yeah, there is that.
It should be banded based on everybody, not just I'm going to earn 10 cents a record play more than the Beatles over there. It should be everybody should be getting the same, because a lot of struggling artists now, you're never going to get airtime on local radio unless you've already been selected by your radio label. Spotify is where you can find new music. People do load stuff up there, and this is a good way for people to earn money, but it needs to be the same for everybody, not just for your A-listers.
Taking it down a notch now, let's get on to the sad stuff. So let's face it, the two biggest deaths in music were Bowie and Prince in the same year, 2016. That sucked. Like, we've lost a lot of good artists over the last decade, but I think those two were the two that really, I think, rang home for a lot of music fans. That two artists still at the peak of their musical powers, just gone like that, and I think it hit home. Yeah,
it was a double-edged sword for me, because as tragic as it was that they'd gone, and it's a weird thought to think there'll not be another David Bowie album or Prince album, it actually made people reevaluate their back catalogues, and that was stunning.
We did that recently with the 80s records. I think we just did a bit of...
Everyone's kind of doing that. Everyone's going back to all of their albums, playing them again, and realising what those two artists had actually achieved.
I mean, hasn't Prince got enough stuff in his recording studio to release an album a year for the next 50 years or something like that? Because he was such a prolific artist and was very selective on what he released.
But I hope that stays in the archives, because the fact that he was very selective, and he's not going to profit from them putting out all of that stuff. So I think as long as their name isn't sullied by somebody going, I found these really hidden recordings, because if those artists weren't ready to release them at the time, then I think they shouldn't be released, because it should be the artists who have the choice of what they're choosing to release.
I don't think since Michael Jackson was such big names in music that passed away with that big of an impact.
Silence in the room there. He said that. Is it careful? So yeah, obviously, some big deaths there, but we won't dwell on that too much because we talked about Bowie a lot on the show. Also, the Eagles of Death Metal terrorism event and the Ariana Grande terrorism event was the fact that gigs were no longer safe places to go because of what had been done, and yeah, it's a change. Don't say what you're going to say. I know what you're going to say, Ryan.
I'm not mentioning our cancelled Radiohead gig.
Yeah, you're not going to mention that cancelled Radiohead gig.
Still quite annoyed, but we won.
It's just shocking that these things were happening. Obviously, terrorism can take place anywhere, but for that to be a gig, a place where
it's
you
targeting gigs now, and it's targeting people who are out to enjoy themselves.
Like you can't feel necessarily safe at a gig anymore, and that's a shame, really.
It's always good though the way people rallied round afterwards, though. Which I know you get this after, or you should get this after kind of any kind of attack of any sort. But with any of the concerts that have been targeted, the response by the public and the artists has been absolutely phenomenal. Where you've had just people getting back together and going, okay, you are doing this, but I'm not scared. I'm going to turn up the next week. I'm going to go to a gig. And I'm going to enjoy music, and think it was just such an awesome response.
Well, both artists went back and played at the same venue, and I think
that's
quite important.
And I think Ariana Grande is like doing Manchester Pride as well, or something like that.
Yeah.
So like she's practically been adopted as a citizen at this point by that city. So
move on to some less bleak stuff now. Okay, so the Stone Roses reformed. A lot of bands got
I
to
thought
that.
you said less bleak.
A lot of bands got back together in the last decade. It's been a running trend, but I can't think of anything where I got more excited than seeing the Stone Roses back together. I never thought I'd see that happen. Like the fact that they managed to put aside whatever was going on to do it.
As I said, it's been driven by money, it's been driven by streaming. It's the only way they're going to get their share of the revenue. They've got to go back on tour. We saw it with Fleetwood Mac, who've done 6 farewell tours, I think, at this point. And it's kind of...
How many times did the Eagles
reform
and tour?
After they said they'd never reform when they split up the first time. Yeah. It's kind of that's what it's driven by. They've got to get a paycheck at the end of the day.
It's driven by that, but I think sometimes there's the rare occasion where you're like, oh, that actually feels good to see that, and it makes you go back and appreciate that. It made me go back and listen to Stone Roses
reform.
Oh yeah,
just in case you missed that one.
I think Ash are back on tour as well.
But it's like the big bands you want to see like that. I mean, would everybody get nostalgic about an Oasis reunion if that ever happened? Because I don't know.
Never going to happen.
But for the Stone Roses, I felt that was something a bit special.
I don't know, as someone who likes Fool's Gold and literally nothing else they've done.
I'm waiting for their Happy Mondays to reform again.
I think they're still going, aren't they?
Are they still going?
I think Sean Ryder thinks they're still going.
He just turns up.
Six Music saved from closure in 2010, so this was playing out over the course of the last couple of decades, really. So it was in 2019, but in 2010 it got saved. I feel like, as a station, I don't listen to it all the time, but that station's gone from strength to strength, and it's important to have a station like that supporting new music, because I feel like Radio 1 has just gone down the toilet. Like, I don't even know what that station is anymore, and then just commercial radio is utter trash. And whereas you've got Six Music that's just trying still to be different, and the content is... there's always something... You put that on, you can find something new.
When BBC tries to compete with anything commercialised, like Radio 1 or BBC One like that, it automatically is worse, because they can't fund it to the same level as you can on a commercial station. And as you said, it's when you have an A-list of 20 songs on repeat all day, every day, and it's kind of, here's the songs you heard an hour ago, again. And it's kind of, Six Music was completely different with that. It was throw it away, we'll go back to being about music.
Yeah, I'd like to... Because it felt like the music was being curated by the presenters. So there were certain presenters throughout the week that I would listen to, because there was a good chance that they would play something that I would go, I've not heard that before, I'm really interested in that band. And I have gone out and bought albums as a result of hearing their songs for the first time on Six Music. So I kind of like that it's not an algorithm that's somewhere deciding that, this is the song that you should like. It's actually people that I kind of... appreciate their sense of music taste.
It feels like a bit like a continuation of John Peel's show.
Yeah.
It's kind of, John Peel's irreplaceable. Every new John Peel was irreplaceable. Where Six Music was kind of, well, we'll divide it out. We'll pick people who are specialists in their genre, and we'll get them to pick the music, as you've said, Keith. And it kind of feels like it's a continuation of when BBC were pushing music and pushing new artists.
Yeah, the music's important on there, and I think, the music is key. the presenters themselves have a genuine love for music, and that's what comes across in everything they pick. I think the fact that some of the shows are themed is wonderful. You know, you can listen to, I know, Craig Charles Going Crazy, you can listen to a Freak Zone and delve in some really wonderful stuff. You can put it on at 2 or 3 in the morning and they'll play a gig in its entirety. It's a wonderful, wonderful radio station that I just wish there was a few more like that, and a few more people who would take some chances. And like, they'll play brand new music. You know, sometimes these artists aren't even signed. And it's amazing that the BBC are doing that. So it's how Radio 1 probably should be and isn't, unfortunately.
Like, I don't listen to a lot of radio, but if I do listen to the radio, it's going to be Six Music, because I know there's always going to be something interesting, even if I don't necessarily like what I'm hearing. It's always interesting, which is more than could be said about Radio 1, where it's like the same pop songs over and over.
And the other thing is, we've just heard in commercial stations that quite a lot of the commercial stations, is it Bauer Media, I think, getting rid of all their breakfast shows. We're just going to have nationally syndicated breakfast shows now.
Oh, nice.
So like Heart and Capital are all losing their local presenters, which is one of the... You only really had the breakfast show and the drive time show still being local to your area. The breakfast show's gone for most of these people now. So this is going to be a massive impact. Because again, it's going to be London-ized centric, and you're going to lose that relationship with your local areas, and I think that's a bad thing to happen.
So the final one is a silly one, but it was a talking point back in 2010. Lady Gaga wears a meat dress to the MTV Awards.
Well, if you look at that, and this year where she's won in 1 year a Grammy, a BAFTA, an Oscar.
Isn't she like the first woman to do
like that? And there's another award as well, which I can't remember, a Golden Globe. So she's got four major awards in 1 year, being the first person to do that. From, as you said, being in a meat dress, which was just controversy back then. And she's actually built a career out of. And I think that was the first thing, was when she came on the scene, it was all about being controversial. But now she's allowing herself to be an artist again.
Yeah,
she's a true artist, and I think she has been amazing to watch over these last kind of 10 years. Her music is great, it's wonderful. The first time I always had her as kind of like a throwaway pop artist. I thought, oh, she's using gimmicks, I don't get where she's going.
Well, and everybody said she was the new Madonna, didn't you? It was kind of reinvent yourself every album kind of deal.
Still that vibe with her though. I think you know she is a junior Madonna. You know, she knows that. She knows she's not being around the bush of who she's.
She can genuinely sing. I mean, the first time I heard it was she did a jazz album, and I think it's one of the last ones where Amy Winehouse was on. And it's like, oh wow, what a voice! And then from there, she's just gone from strength to strength. I think she did the Super Bowl and absolutely nailed it. If you compare that to Maroon 5 from this year, which is one of the worst things
Oh my
ever.
God, it was cringeworthy.
So they're not even on the same kind of level. Like, she's now super A-list artist in music, and it's cool to see. She's immense at what she does.
And I like the fact that she's abandoning the gimmick thing, because I think that did her no favours at the beginning of her career. Was that it was the gimmick that people were remembering, and not the quality of the song or the lyric or the vocal performance. So I think it's good that she's had the chance to get past the gimmick thing, and her career hasn't stumbled and fallen. That she's only ever been remembered for the gimmick stuff.
The thing with the gimmicks was she tried 3 times to break prior to that, and she reinvented herself every time to try and get. And the gimmicks, they worked for her. At the end of the day, they got her foot for the door. I mean, stuff like Poker Face, which is not a great song in my opinion, but stuff like that got her through the door, and it's allowed her to grow as an artist to the stage where she can be normal now.
But I feel like when she was doing all the gimmick stuff, I was like, oh, she's kind of ridiculous and kind of laughable. But then, like, I think I saw a video of her just singing while playing piano, and I went, she's actually quite good, you know. So I think, like I said, it probably is just you got to do that just to get in there, get the controversy going.
Playing the game at the end of the day, isn't it?
So I think those are the 9 things that defined the decade. The rest of it was just trash. All right, so we talked about the big events of the decade of music. We're going to talk about actually how music sounded in the last decade. So I put a comment here. This is like basically something I found myself saying a lot over the recent years to people. I really couldn't tell you any popular song from the last 10 years. Like, I could tell you songs like Shake It Off by Taylor Swift, maybe a couple of Gaga songs. Like the songs that have been huge, like Get Lucky by Daft Punk, like massive songs. But in terms of like what's been number one over the last 10 years, I'm just so clueless. Like I just don't know.
Well, I look at the two biggest selling artists. I just thought that this might steer us on what the sound has been, and it's Adele and Ed Sheeran. So those are your two biggest sellers. So that's your genre, isn't it? Really.
But even so, I'd say that's not sound though.
I'd say that's the highlights, and to use that phrase very delicately, the highlights of the 2010s in music has been those two artists, because at the end of the day, Adele has got a great singing voice, she has great stage presence. Ed Sheeran, he writes a good pop song. I've got to give it that to him. He can really write a good pop song, and he knows how to pick on the old teenage angst.
Yeah.
And that's kind of his music. Everything else is pretty much just noise nowadays.
I think there's like an electronic hip-hop sound is what I kind of broke it down to. Or is this where you're going?
I've got the terms here, apparently, of what is... They're both classed as EDM.
Yeah.
One is called trap, which is something to do with drum and bass. And then there's Caribbean.
No, trap is stuff like 6ix9ine and those kind of SoundCloud rappers.
Right, okay.
Trap is basically, it's rap music, but you take away all the groove and
Right.
all the interesting stuff, and you just have someone mumbling over it. That's basically what trap is.
It's got mumblecore, basically.
Yeah.
Stuff like, what's his face, Post Malone, that kind of thing.
Okay. But the Caribbean one was the one that stood out, because literally everything I've heard over pretty much the last 10 years sounds like you've gone to a beach hut in Jamaica and it's like literally like a club 18 to 30 party in Jamaica. Like I don't understand what this Caribbean influence sound, how it's so popular in music. Everybody seems to be on that.
I think a portion of that, specifically like a Caribbean influence, is probably because Rihanna got very big, and then everyone just wanted to do what Rihanna was doing.
Even she strayed away from that, though. Like she's got fed up of it. Like
I know,
she's one of those artists I don't consider to be part of that traditional chart scene. Like she's sat with like your Beyonce's and your Jay-Z's, who actually try to be like, well, we're popular, but we want to be different. So I'll get to that. Back to that. There's some few points there.
It's an interesting subject, Guy, because as an older person, obviously I'm not as tied to the charts as I would have been when I was a teenager, but I do quite like sometimes catching up on the old Top of the Popsies. They repeat on BBC4, and you look at the charts when they do their top 40 chart, the rundown. It kind of, even through the mid 80s, the very, very diverse range of music that was in the top 40. You'd have Tom Jones still kicking about. You would have the kind of novelty records. You would have the kind of whatever was the sound of that decade. And I don't think in the past 10 years for me, there's been that shift in music, that glam rock in the 70s, punk in the late 70s, new wave and new romantic in the early 80s, grunge in the early 90s. There hasn't been that quintessential shift to a new sound. And I don't know whether that's because as a collective, we aren't all connecting to music in some way that everybody understands what's going on. So you could watch the top 40 back in the old days and go, I hate all the stuff that my mum and dad listens to, but this is my sound. Whereas now, everybody's kind of isolated in a way that I don't know what you listen to, and I don't know what the person next to me on the bus is listening to, and I don't know what's popular in the kind of overall kind of
This is the one problem with the amount of freedom of choice you have with music nowadays. I think we've all done it. We've all created a playlist where it's stuff that we want to listen to, and it's not very often that you'll move out of your comfort zone of what you like in music, whether it's indie or electronic or something like that. You'll stay on that path, and the charts no longer reflect that because we don't buy singles anymore.
Well, this is one of the points about here is the charts don't matter anymore. And I think that since the push to go towards a download chart, which I think has been this decade, has literally killed the excitement of the chart. The chart was about going out to our price on a Saturday or HMV or Virgin Megastores, buying that single that you wanted to get to number one on that Sunday, and then the excitement Sunday afternoon, listening like, has that made it to number one? Have I helped to get that to number one? That cassette that I bought.
So sitting there with a cassette player, pausing for the advert breaks. It's not a thing anymore.
It's not. The chart doesn't matter anymore. Like. And I think a lot of that has been a lot of a harsh realisation for a lot of artists. Like, they're not going to have charting songs or hits anymore. Like, let's look at the Arctic Monkeys. Their most recent album is their most diverse to date, and they've actually decided to release an album where there's no big singles on it because they haven't been a singles band for about 10 years now. Whereas like last decade, they got 2 number ones from coming from nowhere because they were still releasing singles and there was a singles chart or something. But this isn't a thing anymore. So for a lot of especially guitar and rock bands, I think. The realisation I'm not going to chart, what's the point?
Well, I think that's what I was thinking of when I've looked at this decade. It feels the one decade where the guitar or rock band, there hasn't been a guitar hero, there hasn't been the biggest selling rock bands of this decade have been U2, it was the Stones and the Chili Peppers. So Gibson guitars nearly went out of business, and I think people have stopped buying electric guitars. So that genre of music's kind of gone. So if someone wanted to know what this decade sounded like, rock music isn't really going to be in there as one of the biggest sellers like it has been for the last kind of 60 years.
It's still it's kicking around, but it's a niche thing.
Yeah.
It's in certain corners of things, and you still get people forming bands, but not to the degree. Sort of back in the day, it's like loads of people. It's like a teenage rite of passage. You get a guitar and you try and form a band, and most of them go nowhere. But I think these days it's like because of things like the SoundCloud rap stuff. Yeah. People are like throwing stuff together on a laptop and putting it on SoundCloud and stuff. And
I'll recap this week's top 10 singles and let's see if we actually know anything about this. So first of all, Lewis Capaldi, Someone You Loved In at number 1. No, not a clue.
I mean, like my mind went to Peter Capaldi.
The sweary Scottish man.
Number 2, Rag and Bowman, Calvin Harris, Giant. Not heard it.
I mean, like I know those artists from the fact they get exposure, but
that is a thing. Just mentioning that, and that's something I noticed a lot watching the Brits and the Grammys. That superstar DJ who somehow has no talent yet attaches his name to some other creative person and gets single after single after single. Calvin Harris, the David Guetta and all that lot. That the superstar DJ is a thing. I
thought he was going to go for DJ Khaled, and he was the most egregious example of that.
Oh god, yeah. He turns up, says his own name, and then leaves.
So go for Don't Call Me Up, Mabel. Number 3.
Okay, we won't.
No. Number 4, Break Up With Your Girlfriend, I'm Bored by Ariana Grande. Giving good old life lessons there.
I mean,
that's not a bad song.
Ariana Grande is like probably the big pop star at the moment. Yeah. So that one. Yeah. I can kind of accept that.
Number 5, Seven Rings, Ariana Grande.
Yeah, we're probably going to see a lot of her.
Number 6, The Jonas Brothers are back. Apparently, with Sucker.
Wow.
Number 7, Sam Smith and Norm Manning, Dancing with a Stranger. Again, I know of Sam Smith. Number 8, Tom Walker, Just You and I. Not a clue. Number 9, Pink, Walk Me Home. Again, I know who Pink is.
Yeah. I mean, that's come as a surprise that artist is still getting charted.
And number 10, I have not heard of any of this. Options by NSG featuring Tion Wayne.
Okay.
But the Pink thing might be as a result of it being kind of named like an artist of the decade at Brits recently. So,
I mean, at the same time, this is a sign that we are all a little bit old, and this sort of music isn't for us. But it does prove the chance. They don't seem to matter anymore. And I do think a lot of the music sounds the same. I think like.
Well, so you said off there, music is now defined by algorithm.
There is actually like a formula that music is made, that a lot of pop music is made to. Like someone's actually researched it and looked into it. There is an actual formula that a lot of these things are being made to. So that's why everything sounds the same. They worked out what was popular and went, we'll do that over and over again. Again, it's the corporate thing.
There will be a rebellion though. There always is in music. Every generation there's 5 blokes sat around like us going, it all sounds the same, it's all rubbish. And what happens is you end up with a Prodigy, a Pistols, a Beatles, an Elvis. Someone comes from somewhere and just explodes. And there will be a generation of kids now who will fight back against what sounds like very kind of grey music to us all. And there will be a movement, and it will completely blow people's minds. And then we'll probably all sit around tutting because there's too much swearing or not enough swearing. But it will go in that kind of way, I think.
Well, it's interesting.
I don't think there's the option for that anymore, though, because those people who were controversial and breaking have been driven into the niche segments. I don't think there's a place for them to break through on mainstream music now. I think it's 4 or 5 producers dominate the charts every week, and it's kind of there's music. It's like the Hit Factory with Stock Aitken and Warman, but worse now. There's certain studios which pump out song after song after song.
Well, it's interesting what you said about rebellion, because I would say the most rebellious thing that artists have done this decade has been the concentration on the album. So you've seen certain artists who you'd expect to be reaching the upper parts of the charts, like I've mentioned Beyonce, Rihanna, Frank Ocean. These artists are big artists. They're making Kendrick Lamar. They're making albums. They're not making singles.
Yeah.
They've decided we're in it for the album. We're not in it for the singles here.
But you pick out artists who can do that with no fear of losing market share. It's they're not doing it because they're like, oh, I'm kicking against the PRICKs. It's because they go, oh well, what can we do as our next gimmick things? They're not. I don't. They might be, but I don't truly believe they're doing it for the integrity of, like, I want to explore myself as an artist. They've got the power and the wealth behind them that they can go, I can try this, and if it doesn't work, next time I can stick out an album of singles that are going to chart.
What about, then, we touched on this because I mentioned the Stone Roses, the comebacks. So, like, a comeback, isn't that? Like, I liked the Stone Roses comeback, but at the same time, I'm kind of sick of comebacks. Like, I'll give you a fine example of a comeback which has happened, a band that broke up and then came back within a decade. Now, don't get me wrong, I love this band. I'm glad they're making the music. I don't think they should have even announced the split. But LCD Sound System broke up in 2011, got back together in 2016. Between the space, Radiohead hadn't between two Radiohead albums. So Radiohead hadn't made another album between that. They broke up, got together, back together, and made another record. So it's like, I don't even understand what that means. Like, I'm glad they're back because I love that band. But what does the breakup even mean? And do we need comebacks?
It's column inches, isn't it? You'll have one person in the band who'll go off, I want to do a solo project. So the band breaks up. They release their solo album, then the band reforms after the solo project goes down the Swanee.
But other bands have done that kind of thing and survived, like the Strokes. Julian Casablancas went off and did stuff. The Killers are the same.
Did stuff with Daft Punk.
So there's kind of like bands can do other things at the same time. So.
I mean, one of your favourite bands, The Horrors, isn't that kind of one of those projects that splits in and out every time?
I think they do, yeah. But
and I was under the impression that LCD Sound System was one guy and then a rotating.
Yeah, I mean, it pretty much is, yeah.
So the idea of it splitting up doesn't make any sense.
That's him walking out of the studio.
I mean, like, I just think for me personally, I don't know about you guys, like this decade has lacked enough. It's been nothingness. There's been great music that's come along, but it's been a chore. You really had to go and search out music. Like, even like going online to find music isn't the same. Like, I remember last decade, I was finding out new bands online, reading blogs and things like that. That's not even a thing anymore. You don't get that kind of like blog culture promoting new bands, I don't think, anymore. Like, you're not really, you're getting your recommendations on Spotify, which Lee is saying is the algorithm. And
as you mentioned, with Spotify recommendations, they're going to pick stuff is exactly the same as what you're listening to. It's going to be more of the same, not something a bit different. I mean, I have a favourites playlist which I'll play once every couple of weeks, and I find myself skipping off it because I'm bored of listening to the same songs over and over again.
Then again, you say that, but because I listen to so many different genres, Spotify can't figure out what I like.
But I think you have to mix it up to do something like that. You've got to put classical in the middle of your punk playlist, and that's the only way you'll get Spotify to recognise that you want something different.
I'm not sure I 100% agree, because I am old. So for me, it should be that I'm stuck in my ways and I don't discover new music. But I kind of look back at the past decade, and there's a hell of a lot of new artists in the music that I've stumbled across. I don't buy or subscribe to Spotify, so I don't listen to a lot of music through that. So somehow I'm hearing it.
Jules
whether
Holland.
It's true. No, well, not even Jules Holland, because you watch Jules Holland and you just go, oh my God, he's got some real trash on there. And you do tune in to watch certain artists when you know they're going to be on Jules Holland. But sometimes I find it's just, I go into a shop, and it was what happened to me with Arcade Fire. I went into a shop in Stratford, they were playing Arcade Fire, and the next time I went in, and I immediately went and bought that album because I liked it. The same with the Killers. I went into a shop and Hot Fuzz was playing, and I liked it, and immediately bought that album. So somehow I'm hearing things and picking up new artists, because it is kind of happening around me. I just don't think there's the definitive way of finding it. It's not like you're listening to a John Peel or Annie Nightingale or the charts, but somehow you stumble across it and you're finding new music and new artists.
One of the main ways I've discovered music in the last decade has been soundtracks.
Yeah.
Like, just songs turning up on soundtracks to things, and I'm like, well, that sounds good, and then going and checking it out and finding more stuff off the back of it.
I'll leave you with this final thought before we start talking about our actual albums of the decade and stuff. Q magazine called the band of the decade the 1975. In fact, that's what we're looking at here, people.
I've never bought a 1975 record.
I don't think I've ever
probably couldn't name a song by them.
I don't think I've ever heard a song by them.
Yeah.
I've heard the name around, and that's about it.
So I thought he was going to go for NME becoming a freemium magazine as well.
Oh yeah, that happened.
But again, who buys magazines to get opinions on music anymore?
I feel like if that's the, I mean, I've heard a bit of that band's music. It's distinctly average. But if that's the state of a band that could be the defining band of this decade, then music needs to pull its socks up over the next decade and sort itself out.
I think just the concept of one band representing the whole decade is just not how this is going to work at the moment, because we're all listening to different things and there's so many different ways to listen to music. I think it's more diverse than it's ever been, and sort of summing it up with a single band is impossible.
Yeah,
I think that's the central problem with that.
Q magazine would have been better off going, right, the band of the decade is whatever you're listening to most, and just turned it over to their leadership and
like,
just said it's whatever you're listening to. That's the band of the decade.
Kind of like when Time magazine did the person of the year is you.
Yeah.
You know?
I think the whole thing has been about this decade. It's either been a nostalgia where people go back and find what they want to listen to and concentrate on that, and outside of that nostalgia, it's just been repetitive dirge online, and it's just been a case of, we'll make music for 14-year-old girls because that's who are the only people who still go and buy a record.
Apart from me, Guy, and the 14-year-old girls.
Yeah. I mean, more like singles on a regular basis.
But I don't want to put down 14-year-old girls because I have one live in my house, and I must admit that it's exciting to have younger people in the house because she'll play stuff, and I will go, this is terrible, but she will play stuff that I'll go, actually that's pretty good. And I've been introduced to quite a few artists that I've kind of liked because she's liked them. And there's certain things that I kind of wouldn't have kind of listened to normally. So it is quite interesting to sometimes just kind of go, okay, I'll give this a try. Because like she hates it when I have, now that's what I call 80s on the TV, but she is quite surprised when she has her channels on and I can at least know who some of the artists that she likes are, and there is some good music out there for 14-year-old girls.
I just have an image of Keith with a pipe now. Yes, I do appreciate XX.
I do quite like a bit of Dua Lipa.
Some of this crap is quite hardcore.
Is this your way of telling us you're a Rhea Ora fan?
No. There are quite a few other artists I do quite like. Billie Eilish, I think, very popular at the moment. She's quite good. Dua Lipa, I like quite a lot of the Dua
It starts
Lipa
to sound
stuff.
like you're trying to get down with the kids here.
But there is good music out there, and I think it's just accessibility and being exposed to it is trickier.
I think one of the sides of how music is nowadays is the example where Rita Ora goes on. Was it the German version of The Voice? And she sings a Rita Ora song, and they all go, and none of them turn round. And then they actually don't realise it's Rita Ora on stage singing a Rita Ora song. I think that kind of sums up where we are in music nowadays.
Brilliant.
Without the branding and marketing, can you identify these artists?
Right, so now we're going to talk about albums of the decade. I'm getting the whole link to myself here because I picked 10. But to be fair, I conceived the show, so it's, even though it's your show.
You're such a modest man.
Which one of us? It's both our shows.
Guy and Things I Love, part 1.
So I put together a list of 10 albums which I've listened to the most this decade. So some of them are probably going to be controversial, you're not going to agree with me. I tried to put them in order of 10 that I think what they rank. For me personally, these were what represented the best of the music in the last decade. It stops at 2016. So I don't know what that says. But I'll kick it off. So number 10, I put this Tame Impala Lonerism, which I believe was 2012. It's a great record. I think a lot of people do write it off sometimes as just being faux psychedelic, you know. But it's a really strong record, and effectively it is one guy making this. It's a guy called Kevin Parker on his own doing all this music, and it's got the vibe of a 60s record, it's like a loving tribute to 60s psychedelic records, and I think it's probably one of the best.
Like a tribute to Mike Oldfield.
It's a great record, and there's when you go back and listen to it over and over, there's a lot of texture in it and things that you don't pick up on first listen. It's a good summary record, it's a feel good album. I don't think they've bettered it since, but it's a standout. I think they're genuinely a great band. I think a lot of people do love them, to be fair, I think. Number 9, Frank Ocean, Channel Orange.
Not Blonde.
No, Channel Orange is the better record. Frank Ocean obviously came out of nowhere with Nostalgia Ultra, which then obviously people were so excited for the release of his debut album, and he just delivered. I feel like it's going to be controversial, but I feel like if he released music more frequently, and he could become the R&B equivalent of Prince. Obviously Prince still soul and funk involved, but I think Frank Ocean could become the R&B equivalent of Prince. He's always doing interesting stuff. There's almost like an indie DIY credibility to his music. It's just an interesting record, just interesting sounds, interesting subject matter, because obviously he came out about his sexuality just before the release of the record, which was quite a brave thing to do, putting out a record where in quite a homophobic industry, such as the hip-hop industry, was a brave move. And I think this album inspired a lot of people in the R&B world, like Beyonce and Rihanna, to actually consider the album as a format, which obviously we discussed in the last link. I think they saw what Frank Ocean was doing. They're like, well, we can do this with our records as well and produce it more meaningful. 8, Warpaint, self-titled. It's a really under-the-radar record. It's they're a great band and a lot of people like them, but I feel like this album's just going to get completely overlooked in a lot of end-of-decade lists. And for me, it's a fantastic record. It just sounds like 80s indie music, and it's got vibes of the early Cure stuff like Pornography, and 17 Seconds is a Cure record, I forget. Even the one with a forest on there. I'm looking at you.
Possibly. That's a long time ago, that is.
But everything about it, just the musicianship of these 4 women is just fantastic. The drumming, the bass, that combination. It's just smooth and it's dark. It just feels nice. It's a good record to listen to on it's like a dark autumny night.
It's much rawer than their follow-up album as well, which I think is a good thing. That it is a very powerful album.
I think the second album was good. It took a bit more of a go. Third album's more polished, but I don't think they've released a bad record to date. I think they're genuinely. I think they're one of the decade's better bands, and they've just really they've been known, but they haven't had the success they really should deserve. So for me, it's one of my favourites. It's always a go-to record. 7, they had to be in it at some point. The Horrors, Skying. I think it's their best record. They were the joke back at the mid-decade in the noughties. Then they excelled themselves with Primary Colours, and everyone was actually like, hang on, who's this band? And I think this was them taking the sort of shoegazy sound they had on Primary Colours, and they influenced it with Manchester baggy sound and stuff like that, and it just kind of, I don't know, it's just a nice sounding record. It almost sounds like, I don't know how this sentence works, but it's got a very aquatic vibe to it. I almost feel like I should be under the sea listening to it, or by a beach. I think it's got a very sort of
dreamy kind of.
Yeah, there's just I don't think they've bettered it. So since that, I think that's the point where they made their best record. They haven't made they haven't made a bad record since, but they haven't bettered this. I feel like they hit their creative peak on this, and from there they were just like, well, we could just keep making that record and everybody like it still, so it's cool. But for me, it's just something I always go back to. I find it a great record. 6, Metronomy, The English Riviera. Metronomy are a bit of a jokey band, because it's a bunch of people with synthesizers making stupid sound effects, but I think this is the first time they decided to actually take it seriously and make a proper album. It's a great record. It's full of solid hits, and it's just really unique. And The Look is a superb song. I'd say for me it's one of the best songs of this decade. It's so simplistic, and it sounds like seaside pier music. It's like a vibe. I feel like maybe I was at the beach this year, this decade a lot. No, it's genuinely superb little record. I think again, it's going to be one of these ones that gets missed. I think in a lot of lists at the end of the year, but it's a classic. 5 Daft Punk Random Access Memories. Get a feeling I might have taken yours there, Ryan.
This almost made it to one of my 3, but I was like, someone else is going to mention it, so I'll leave it off.
I have many things to say about this record. I will save them till my little bit.
It's a great record. There's some flaws on there. Not everything is a banger on there, but I think like Daft Punk, they haven't made an album since 2005, Human After All, which was basically just a series of loops.
We have the Tron Legacy soundtrack in between.
Yeah. But I think this was Daft Punk aiming for the pop big time, and let's face it, they made the song of the decade with Get Lucky. That was a song that had universal appeal. Everybody liked it. It will be a classic for years to come.
It was a definite return to form after Human After All as well.
Yeah,
I could not stand that album.
It's a great record. There's some good stuff on there. I think my personal favourite is the track Touch with Paul Williams, who composed the Bugsy Malone soundtrack.
And Phantom of the Paradise, which is a fantastic film. Brian De Palma. If you've not seen it, worth checking out.
Because he just breaks down into this like almost jazz funk midsection. You expect jazz hands and Chicago dancers and stuff like that. It's it's that's really interesting. And it also pays tribute to Native New Yorker by Odyssey, which I quite like. But it's just them having fun, wasn't it? They haven't made a record since. I don't think they need to. I think they Daft Punk kind of hit their opus with that. We've done everything we need to. We just live off Get Lucky now. For David Bowie, Black Star.
Yeah.
It's not his finest record. It's not.
I think it's the record that's had the most meaning.
Yeah, it's a meaningful record. It's an intelligent, well thought out piece of music because of what was going on in his life that obviously we didn't know, and he put it down in words.
It genuinely is upsetting to listen to that record. It really is a hard slog.
It is. It is an upsetting piece of work, and but it's in terms of what he was doing. It's a shame that his life ended on that record, because it was where he would have gone from that would have been exciting, because he was obviously having a resurgence again. He never not had a resurgence, but he's having this late career heyday again with The Next Day as well, which also came out this decade. And I think that it would have been interesting to see where we went from Black Star.
But I didn't think the Black Star was the album that he knew was his last. I didn't think there was anywhere to go after that. That whole album sounds to me like this is me, this is my time, and this is my final statement about my music. I couldn't comprehend that because it happened so quickly together, that the album was released on the Friday and his death was over the weekend, that it just seemed to sum up that this was the end. It's done, and I can't imagine there being anything following it, because it does sound like that very kind of here's my final will and testament type of expression of music.
That's fair enough. Yeah. No, you're probably right. I trust your opinion because you're older than me. 3, Radiohead. I've put a moon-shaped pool here. It's a moon-shaped pool by Radiohead from 2016.
A moon-shaped pool.
This was a superb Radiohead record. They seem to have, like within Rainbow's last decade, they seem to get one record per decade, which is great. I felt like this was almost like a greatest hits, a show off kind of here's Radiohead, here's everything we've ever done, and a little bit more because Johnny does orchestra stuff now. Here's everything we have done and what we can do, all in this one 11-track record, and that is what you're getting for a while. We might make another record, we might not. Because to me, it feels like with the Bowie record, like Keith just said, it feels like a final statement from Radiohead, because there's a lot of songs on here like "Burn the Witch" and "True Love Waits," which has been kicking around since 1995 in acoustic versions, which finally got put on record. It almost felt like Radiohead were just exhausting their back catalogue of songs they hadn't been able to perfect, got them right finally, and be like, done. We don't need to do anything else. This is what Radiohead has done. We've proved it. We don't have anything else to do. We're not going to push the boat out creatively with this record. We're not going to make another Kid A. We're just going to make what people would expect and want from a Radiohead record. And I think it delivered. It was a fans Radiohead record. I don't think it was anything other than that. They didn't try and do anything different. They just wanted to do a Radiohead record. Number 2. This is so close between 1 and 2 because both of these records are extraordinary. but I put this as number 2 mainly because I feel like number 1's more of a talking point. But number 2, PJ Harvey, Let England Shake.
Oh, okay.
Is a superb record. Everything about it is fantastic. It's fantastically produced. The sounds are interesting. Lyrically, I feel it's an important record. It's vital. It's talking about war, but it doesn't just talk about modern warfare. It talks about like the World War One, World War Two. It's like a history lesson. It's steeped in British history. It's just a beautiful listen, and an artist again who's been going since the 90s does something completely different, and it's just an extraordinary bit of music, really. I think every time I listen to it, I find new things about it I love. I'm never going to get bored of that record.
Is that the one she recorded as an art installation, or was
it
was around that kind of time, wasn't it? That's amazing in itself.
Didn't she record it as she was touring places? She visited places and recorded songs in each place.
Did she? I didn't know.
I think so. I think that's how she did it. That she could. That's why they're kind of the songs that they are, because of her reaction to wherever she was.
For me, and for the best, what I think is the best record released this decade, it's going to be controversial. People are not going to agree with me.
Baby Shark, Pink Fong.
Kanye West, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, is an absolute masterpiece of music. He destroyed his career over this decade, but he started with this was his finest work. Like, he'd built it over 4 records, perfecting his sound, and he made what essentially is like a prog rock hip hop album. It is self-indulgent, it's overblown, it's excessive, but at the same time it's fantastic because all of that represents what he is feeling on the record. He's dissecting his character. It's literally who is Kanye West and why do I hate Kanye West? He picks himself apart on that record. It's a fantastic piece of music. It's beautifully created and the sound is stunning. I think as well it's been the template for hip hop music over the last 10 years. I think if you hadn't had that, you wouldn't have had Kendrick Lamar's To Pimp a Butterfly. Strangely not on my list, but you wouldn't have had that. I don't think Frank Ocean would have had the push to create Channel Orange, which wouldn't have prompted people like Beyonce. I feel like, this record has got a lot to answer for the way that hip-hop music has developed over the last 10 years, because hip-hop has kind of, you see getting your modern chart, mainstream crap at hip-hop, but sometimes you look at a hip-hop record and it is masterfully produced. People have now taken it to a form of art and want to create, intelligent music from it and, something people can enjoy. And I think this was the record that did that.
It almost seems like it damaged him, though, is the weird thing. Like, he's had a mental breakdown since then.
Oh, yeah, trashed him.
I think when any great artist manages to achieve what they tried to do, whether that to paint in a film, an album, whatever it is, it seems like he's actually broken. It sent him completely loopy. He kind of delves so much into his own mind that he talks about himself in the third person constantly now. It's as if this Kanye West character has overtaken who the real Kanye West is. And he just comes across as a maniac. He's gone completely insane. Well, that's how he's coming across. And I just wonder if the stress of this album just kind of sent him over the edge, because the attention to detail is like, it's complete perfection all the way through, which that's a lot of stress on one person to try and create and to pull it off as well.
I heard that he was on all the tracks on the record. He had he booked out a whole recording studio and he was working on a different track in every single studio in there, and he was just running between studios, perfecting all the tracks. I mean, that is. And then how do you go from that to releasing the Life of Pablo, where you had to keep continuing updating, which I think is the most overrated record of the decade, because people seem to love that and didn't actually realise it was a piece of trash because he couldn't work out how to complete it. How can you praise something which couldn't be completed?
It's kind of like you went into My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy with a plan, and The Life of Pablo was disembodied thoughts and sounds, and this is what I kind of feel it should be. And it's like every time he's listened to it, he's tried to recreate what is in his head, and you just can't get it on paper anymore.
So yeah, that is my controversial decision for number 1 for me. But I think
I was hoping for the 1975 from you.
Yeah. No, I just feel that I feel like it's a record which kind of like, it almost kind of represents where a genre can get to if you push it to its limits, and he was the first person to do it, and I think he's done a world of good for the hip hop genre going forward and what can come from it going forward. But I think that he's gone completely mental, and he'll never make a record as good as that. Right, so I've unveiled my 10. I whipped out mine. Now let's whip out yours. Who's going first? Should I pick one at random?
Yeah.
Alright, I'll go Kirk.
Okay. Should have been near the mic. Well, first of all, thanks for not picking any of mine, Guy. That was wonderful. And I'm glad you picked 10. We all get to pick 3. That feels really fair.
Mine was representational across the board.
Gotta say, this was hard. I found it easy to pick 2, and then to get a third in was really hard because there's lots that were fighting for that space. I was going to just initially, I feel like I'm claiming a fourth here just by waffling, but I was going to go for anything by King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard because they've got a great band name, one of the best band names of all time, and they release 4 albums a year.
They do, don't they?
And I just think that's just crazy, but I'm not going to go for them because none of their albums are actually good. They're just all okay because they're trying to cram too much out all the time. But I think it's a fun approach. So my kind of third in the list was Flying Lotus, an album called You're Dead. It's not a brilliant album, but it's fun. And I don't normally go for fun albums, but it's an album that's got Thundercat on there, Kamasi Washington, Kendrick Lamar, Snoop Dogg makes an appearance. One of the tracks, they just try and recreate the sound to the Tetris game. It's an artist, and I think there's a song about Freddie Mercury on there as well. It's just fun. It's a real laugh. It's brilliantly played. The album artwork's wonderful. I got to see it perform live, and he does 4D pyrotechnics and everything. So it's just a really interesting album. That was early on in the decade. It's about 2011. And I just thought, no, it's cool. It's just I can listen to it any day of the week. Non-offensive. Yeah, that's where I'm starting.
I mean, like the artists that you've said there, like Kendrick Lamar, Kamasi Washington, Thundercat, who have all had quite big decade, not massive decades, but they've all released quite similar work this decade as well. Well, Kendrick's been huge.
And I think the Gaslamp Killer might have been on there, but I don't think we can talk about him anymore. It's a bit like the Michael Jackson thing, so we'll leave that. The second one I thought was a really important album was Epic by Kamasi Washington. Because I did not see this coming. It's a triple album that 99% of it is instrumental jazz, it hit the top of the charts and sold millions. I mean, okay, I think maybe I know you, Amy Winehouse, Gregory Porter's, and Robert Glasper's have paved the way for jazz music starting to become cool again. But I mean, if you take him out of it, it's probably Michael Bublé's the biggest selling jazz artist. So to get this saxophonist out of nowhere, like I say, it's a triple album, and it's hefty, it's political in there. It was right at the pinnacle of the Black Lives Matter movement, and he came out performing it. There's a Malcolm X eulogy read out halfway through the album, and it is such a powerful record, and it's kind of opened the doors for jazz. So the British jazz scene, even though it was ticking along, has now been recognised as it's great. You've got these bands like Sons of Kemet, Go-Go Penguin, Portico. They're all out there, and people are starting to listen to jazz again. There's not this, it's something Dad listens to, or let's say the Bublé kind of Kenny G vibe. It's jazz is back, and it took a guy to do a triple instrumental album to kind of shove it in your face and go, here it is.
Well, I think this links to the Kanye thing as well, because I think with my selection of Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy paved the way for Kendrick, which is, I think none of us have really touched on it yet, but that is one of the defining records of the decade.
Well, that's it. My number one record is Kendrick Lamar, To Pimp a Butterfly, and I feel like it's not particularly my favourite record of the decade, and I don't even know if it is the best from its craft, but to me it felt like the most important record of the decade. His approach to MCing felt refreshing. It wasn't like his tone of voice. He's got a very thin, weeny kind of voice, and that was acceptable. The album it's an album in its entirety. You have to listen to it cover to cover. It picks up on male mental health issues. There's suicide brought up in it. There's all the things that have been taboo for the last God knows how many years. And here is an African American man singing as Donald Trump is taking office about everything that is going wrong in that country, and laying down wonderful beats. He's got people like George Clinton's on the record. I think Snoop Dogg's on that because he's everywhere at the moment. And even the Isley Brothers appear at one point. But it's a long album, which I know most hip hop records are. But I kind of got to the end of it and I was drained and just thought, I think I need to listen to this again and again and again to get all the different messages of what this guy's trying to get across. That as a black man in America at this moment in time, it's and he kind of did it in an immense musical way, and I just thought, wow, it kind of really blew my mind. So that's my number one album of the decade.
Go on then, Ryan. Got anything original for us?
Well, actually, my third album, which I did discount, mainly because to me, the albums are stuff that I will go back to and then do it again and again as a full album, not as a collection of singles, as a full album. The one that was my third place was One Life Stand from Hot Chip.
That's a really interesting choice.
Yeah, which is not as great as their previous albums, but it's got some great singles on it, but I wouldn't say it's an album.
So yeah, I was going to say sell that to me, because for me, Hot Chip have always been a band where they've had like a couple of huge sounding singles, like they always drop some massive sounding singles, but in the album department they miss the hurdle.
And
like
Falls. Again, that's why I dropped them out of my top 3 list, was because it was just, I love Hot Chip as a band. I love some of their singles. Over and Over is one of my favourite singles of all time. It's one that you can listen to again and again, and the name sums it up, because it's one of those you can have on repeat multiple times. It is a beautiful song. But I think One Life Stand has some fantastic high notes and a lot of low notes. That's why I don't think it's a great album. My 2 albums, which I selected, which are on constant repeat in my house, is Metronomy, English Riviera.
It's a good album, that.
Great album, that one. And as I said, this defined the band. This was their 3rd studio release, and it was them agreeing that they were a pop band finally. I think the bassist left midway through recording originally, so he recorded half the tracks. He dropped out. They brought a new bassist in. They brought a new drummer in. But it is the perfect pop album.
I mean, it's a silly sounding record. Like I said, they're a silly sounding band. I mean, they were trying to attempt some bit of a story, and there is still silliness to the record. That's because they used like plinky synth, but it genuinely it's a great sounding record. Like the Bay is fantastic.
Oh, that's my favourite track on the album, is The Bay. The Look is quite second. Everything Goes My Way is also a great song on there. I mean, there is some great music on there, but it's an album which I would say is the perfect summer's day drive album.
It's simplistic in what it does. It's just very simple. Here's a couple of synthesizers, a drum kit and a bass, and this is what you can do. It doesn't have to be exuberant. It doesn't have to be EDM. It can just be like little synth riffs and little drum beats, and you can make something quite cool and quite unique from it.
It's a happy record, and that's one of the few things you get nowadays. It's a happy record. It's a record you can put on and makes you feel happy to listen to, and there's not much out there nowadays that actually fills that gap for me. And it's kind of like, if I'm having a rubbish day, I'll put the English Riviera on, hear that Hammond organ at the start of The Look, and it just makes me happy. It's a great song to listen to, and I really recommend it. If you've never heard it, really go and listen to the English Riviera. My album of the decade is Daft Punk, and not Tron Legacy, it's Random Access Memories, because
you are like the biggest fan of Daft Punk.
I am the biggest Daft Punk fan. I spent £120 on Daft Punk Christmas ornaments. That didn't come until May, I think they finally arrived. Oh, they are beautiful little ornaments. But to me, French electronic is something I've been listening to for years, and this is their perfect album. Discovery, I love. Discovery is still going to be my favourite album, but I'd say Random Access Memories is your perfect Daft Punk album.
I mean, I think with the record, it's like there's they couldn't do another Daft Punk record, because I feel like at that time of like French stuff, like it's going around like Cassius and Air, that kind of like that phase had kind of gone. So what they've done instead is they've gone back and looked at every great era of dance music, from like disco and whatnot. I'm just pinpointing one there, but they took everything and put it into one package.
To me, it's a love letter to a musical genre that never existed. It gets called a disco funk album. I wouldn't say it's a disco or a funk album at all. It's got Nile Rodgers in there, you've got Moroder in there, so it has elements of it.
Oh, that Moroder track is extraordinary.
I love that track.
It's literally like a life story.
It's got Casablancas in there. It's got a real good mix, and they went and they found the best people. I think they spent something like £1 million on production, which is pretty unspoken. But that you can tell that's pretty unspoken for Daft Punk, who are used to loops, samples, a couple of synthesizers, a couple of vocoders, and that's it. Whereas this, they just went, I want to make something special.
It's a full band Daft Punk record. That's what it is. It's like how can you do a French dance music record as a band effectively? Like how can we transform our sound to be a band?
And the collaborators they brought in, Pharrell was at the peak of his fame when he come in and collaborate with this, and they picked the perfect collaborators. I mean, Moroder. I mean, who else can you get to give you a disco sound?
Yeah.
Nile Rodgers. Who else can you get to give you funk guitar?
Yeah. It was a perfect pop record.
Yeah.
They nailed it.
I mean, like Nile Rodgers as well. He's had a fantastic decade off the back of this as well. Like he shouldn't have had the decade he's had. Respectfully, I mean, let's face it, Chic are amazing, but he shouldn't be having the fame that he's
that
having.
was all down to random access memories and having him on stage and having him collaborate. But my track off the album doesn't appear on any of the world releases except for the Japanese release.
Oh, here we go.
Which is Horizon, which is a love letter to Pink Floyd.
Oh,
if you've never listened to it, on the Japanese album, it's After Contact, which, again, amazing album, and watch it compared to 2001 A Space Odyssey, because it syncs up perfectly.
Wow.
But Horizon is a beautiful, beautiful song, which is a love letter to Pink Floyd of the 70s. If you've not heard it, really recommend it. It's on YouTube. You won't find it on Spotify, because it was a Japanese-only release, but it is a fantastic song.
Nice.
So those were my albums of the decade.
Lee?
Covered by God.
So, my music taste is a little bit weird, and I fully
See,
admit that.
Taylor Swift? No, I've got Taylor Swift's record upstairs, so I can't say it.
there is like a very sort of poppy album in here, but I think my sort of third favourite would be, it's by a group called Got a Girl, and the album is called I Love You, But I Must Drive Off This Cliff Now.
That sounds amazing. Like that is a title.
Yeah,
Guys looking on Discord as we speak.
It's the producer Dan Nakamura working with Mary Elizabeth Winstead.
Oh, nice.
Okay.
I think I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's sort of like he took a lot. Dan Nakamura took a lot of sort of like old '60s French pop, bossa nova, some hip hop influences,
Serge Gainsbourg,
a lot of that sort of stuff, and made an album with Mary Elizabeth Winstead singing on it. And it's just this really chilled out, really great album. And I've had, I listened to the lead track, Did We Live Too Fast? I listen to that on repeat a lot just because it's such a good sort of chilled out, laid back song. She's sort of like the wife of someone who's got all these mistresses, and she's just sort of, you can just kind of picture her lounging around just being like, just, you know, melancholy that her husband's always out. And it's just such a good sound that just evokes all this sort of stuff. And it's not an album I see talked about a lot, but I really love that album.
So I'm totally on board that whenever there's a Hollywood actress on a record, like doing the singing thing, like, I'm totally up for that.
Yeah, and her voice is really, really good. It's sort of like this sort of deeper, sort of sultry voice on there, and it fits that sort of sound as well really well. So
why didn't they
just sort of ennui as an album?
I feel like they should have called themselves the Ramona Flowers, though.
Funnily enough, I think the album did form off the back of the film.
They did it?
Because I think he worked a little bit on the soundtrack, and they got to meet and got talking, and that happened off the back of it. So, my second album is Churches, Every Open Eye. I really love this album. It's such a good pop album that isn't really like popular in like the sort of charts sort of way. I think every song on it is just a really good electronic pop song.
I think Church is one of those bands I love when I remember that they exist. It's kind of like they're on the periphery of my musical knowledge, and I'll listen to songs and they're great songs.
See, I've always
never think to listen to a full album of Churches.
I've never given them the time of day. I kind of wrote them off. I think a bit, which is kind of probably bad of me, but I just didn't. I feel like they came at a time in indie for me which wasn't really blowing my mind, so I kind of like had just written them off as the next 1975.
I kind of came to them late just because I discovered them because they did the theme to Mirror's Edge Catalyst. So I heard that song and I was like, who are these people? I need to listen to more of this, and I just really like pretty much everything on there. They've got like Never Ending Circles, which just hits you as soon as it starts. You've got Clearest Blue, which builds up to what is basically Depeche Mode's I Just Can't Get Enough. Like the entire second half of that song is pretty much just that riff over and over again. And it's just got some really good songs on there. But my album of the decade, is Endless Fantasy by Anna Managuchi. And that's mostly because, you know, I'm the gaming guy on this show, and it is very much an 8-bit video game soundtrack looking for a game to be part of. Anamanaguchi they're a chiptune band. They're a rock band, but they've got they use an actual NES sound chip as an instrument, and it's on all their songs. Most of the songs on there are instrumental, but there's a few where they've got in very sort of poppy sounding voices coming in there. But they sort of do really cool things with that. So there's a track called Japan Air on there, which it's got this really sweet female voice, but she's singing "We're gonna f shit up," and it's just that I think just stuff like that. I really like the sound of it, and the opening track in This Fantasy is just this sort of really big, epic, sort of hopeful track that it's just such a really good feel good track. And they've got a track on there called Meow, which has a cat's meow as an instrument on there. It's just this heavily synthesized thing.
I like the way you managed to loop it back to the first choice, because they did the soundtrack for the Scott Pilgrim beat 'em up game as well.
They did. That's how I discovered them. And then this was the album they did after that. So those were my choices. Again, like I said, a bit off of what sort of a lot of people are talking about, but that's.
But I think that's what's good here. I mean, that kind of emphasises the point we made earlier in the show, that it's so hard to categorise how the decade of music has been, because everybody's got such diverse taste in music. Ryan's big on his big house music. My list, looking back at it, was quite indie heavy. Kurt's, yours was funk and soul heavy. Lee, yours is sort of almost film game inspired in a way. Yeah. So Keith's is going to be Radio 2 inspired.
Funny you should say that. I did get confused between the PJ Harvey albums. It was the Hope 6 Demolition Project was the one she recorded in Visiting Places, not Let England Shake. That's how I managed to get the two confused.
That was the one that was met with controversy a bit as well, because
I still like that.
About a place.
So I made a long list of albums I actually went out and bought over the last decade. It's not a huge list.
It's like the Book of Prize with Keith.
Yeah, but kind of what I decided to do in the end
was
his
receipts.
I've almost cheated a little bit as well, because I've kind of tried to go for the artists that have emerged in the last 10 years rather than people that have had quite a long career. Because obviously I could have gone down the kind of Skeleton Tree, Nick Cave route, but they've been kicking around for such a long time. I kind of thought I'd pick something a little bit different.
Great record, though.
But it's a great record. So my kind of first pick is going to be what is a great concept album, which I kind of heard one track from and then picked up the vinyl, which was great, which is Public Service Broadcasting, The Race for Space, which is basically tells the story of the space race from Sputnik through to the Apollo moon landings, and it uses audio from kind of actual transmissions and TV shows and stuff that charts this whole history of kind of space. So one side is the Russian race, and the other side is the Americans, and it's great. There's some really good sounds on there.
I think you played Go on the show previously, which is one of the best songs.
Yeah, it's basically the launch of Apollo 11, but it's just a great record, because it just takes all of these kind of historical moments and the voices and the sounds that are tied directly to them, and creates a whole soundscape around them. And I absolutely adore that record. It's brilliant. It's an album. It is, like you said, it's an album. You have to listen to the whole thing. But there are standout moments, like Go. Go is a record that you can just play individually. That is just great. It's a power driving record. It's really, really good, and the way they incorporate the audio tracks is fantastic.
There's a track on there which I think I heard it on Radio 6, and it's one where I think the space shuttle goes behind the moon and it cuts out and they're waiting, and it's a goosebump moment. You remember hearing it first time on the radio, and I was waiting, and there's like pulses as you're waiting for the astronauts to make contact, and I was just like, who are these? What is it? It was mind-blowingly brilliant stuff.
And as a thing, the vinyl's really beautiful as well. So it's a really nice piece of work. So I really like that. So my next two choices, I'm kind of cheating slightly, because I'm picking an artist who has produced kind of records over the past decade that I really like.
That's why I left you to
one, I will pick one of the albums as my kind of quintessential version. So I'm picking a kind of indie guitar band who I've recently seen live, and I've been meaning to for a long time. But it's the Wombats, who have
I did not see that come in.
Their first album was kind of 2007, and then they kind of put out 3 more records since. They did one of the best Christmas records of all time recently, which featured Les Dennis in a voice cameo role. But they've put out some good music. It's kind of they've got a really good way with lyrics. They've got a really good way with kind of sounds and how they put together a song. But of their albums that they've put out, I am going to pick their second album, which came out a good while back, which is This Modern Glitch, which has got Technofan, Anti-D, 1996, Walking Disasters. They're just great pop indie records with great guitar riffs and great lyrics, and I really, really like them, and it comes across fantastically live as well.
See,
they were really good. The venue was garbage, but the band themselves were really, really good. It was completely everything you wanted from hearing those songs in a live kind of way. It was great.
So I think that's a good representation of like how like if you don't carry on producing what the industry wants, you get written off. Because let's face it, I'm going to be honest, I wrote them off. I listened to the stuff back in 2007, back when I was at uni, and after that, they were nothing to me. And that's bad of me to say that, but that's how I guess the industry kind of like, if you're not producing what is big or popular anymore, that's it. You're just done, and your records don't get the time of day.
I think the Let's Dance and Joy Division was played to death.
Yeah,
on every single commercial station, and I think everybody was just expecting more of that same repetitious music.
Yeah, they've had, since This Modern Glitch, they've also had Glitterblog and Beautiful People Will Ruin Your Life, and there's not great songs. They are genuinely great songs that you kind of think, oh, there's one or two that I really like. So they put a couple of singles out, and on Beautiful People they put 3 or 4 tracks out. When you get into the album, there's great records throughout it, and my kids like different tracks on that album to what I like, and there's something for everybody in there. And just the turn of phrase they use in their songs are really good. So I kind of really like them. So it's a bit of a cheat, but this Modern Glitch is the one that I come back to time and time again, because it's song after song after song that I can just, kind of listen to again and again. And then for my kind of, I would say almost my artist of the decade, who has emerged in the last 10 years, which is this, and guys should know who this is. It's 2 Swedish sisters who first had a record out in 2010, which came out after I first saw them. I saw them at the Rainbow in Birmingham, in the back room, the kind of tail end of 2009.
You're making this sound like a geek.
2 Swedish sisters in the back room.
Yeah. But it's First Aid Kit, who kind of came out and were doing this kind of folk thing, but doing it really, really well, because there were other faux folk stuff that was knocking about at the same time, including a band who I consider to be the worst band of all time. But First Aid Kit, Mumford & Sons. But First Aid Kit have gone on to develop their sound and become an incredible songwriting duo with fantastic vocal range, absolutely beautiful lyrics, sounds and harmonies that are just fantastic, a great sound. But it's the pick of their records I'm going to pick is actually the one that's came out most recently, which was Ruins, which was out at the beginning of last year, which is just full of some great songs. They've kind of delved into some kind of Americana funk, so they folks type stuff. So I think Stay Gold was one where it was kind of very Emmylou Harris and kind of all that kind of sound, and they had that kind of golden American vibe. But Ruins is a great song that has a little bit of pop to it, but not an awful lot. So they got a song called Fireworks, which is fantastic, and Ruins is a great song, and it's just a phenomenal album, and their vocals are phenomenal. They can do it stripped down to nothing, and it's just their voices, and it's still incredibly haunting and powerful, and I love their music.
Yeah, I've recently sort of been getting into their stuff, and I really like what I've heard so far. So
yeah, it's great. It just sounds phenomenal.
Right, so to wrap up our review of the decade in music, I've got a list of 20 albums that came out over the last 10 years. I'm going to give you the title, you have to tell me the artist. In order to get some points, you just have to shout your name out if you know the answer, and I'll work out who won at the end. I don't think there's a prize incentive here, really.
There's no cheap magazine that you bought on the way here?
I'll have a kick around the house and see if I can find anything as a prize. I can give you, but I'm looking at the CD collection, but there doesn't really seem to be anything I'm going to offer up, really. Alright, let's crack on with that anyway. Right, number 1, Suck It and See.
Red Hot Chili Peppers.
You have to shout your name out.
Ryan, Red
You're
Hot Chili Peppers.
wrong. Nobody?
No idea.
Arctic Monkeys. Modern Vampires of the City.
This is going to go really well. I've already said we don't know many of the albums from the decade.
Here is the we know nothing about music from 2010.
No takers? No guesses?
No.
Vampire Weekend.
Okay.
Good Kid, Mad City.
Oh, I do know that one. Kirk on the sofa. Kendrick Lamar.
That is correct, Kirk.
One.
Have One on Me. No takers? Wow.
Got some clues at least.
Rubbish. This is a great feature.
Give us a couple of clues.
A female singer, early noughties release, early part of the decade.
Rihanna.
Plays a harp.
Plays a harp.
That is like the biggest clue I could give you.
I didn't realise there was a modern artist who played a harp.
Right, moving on. Nobody takers?
No.
It's Joanna Newsom.
I've never heard of that.
don't know
name.
who that is.
You could have just made that up for all I know.
1989.
Ryan, Taylor Swift.
That is Taylor Swift, yeah.
I'm fine that you got that. And I didn't.
I just remember she released an album with a year title in it, and I was hoping it was that one.
Born to Die.
Ryan, Lana Del Rey.
I could have got that one.
You're running away with it now, mate.
Pure Heroin.
Ryan, Lana Del Rey again.
Not Lana Del Rey. Ryan, you're out. Female singer, curly hair. David Bowie was a massive fan of her. No takers?
No.
Flow Out, wasn't it?
It's Lorde.
Lordy. I mean Stan's dad from South Park.
Yeah. The 2020 Experience.
Ryan, Justin Timberlake.
I'm more than happy that Ryan's getting these.
These are not my musical choices. Let's just put this clear.
LP1. Female artist. Dated Robert Patterson.
I don't know who Robert Patterson is.
The guy from Twilight, the vampire guy.
I've never seen Twilight.
No one? Wow. FKA Twigs.
That means nothing.
Again,
Jesus.
I just heard letters. So
Yeah.
that was it.
Helplessness Blues.
This is a wonderful feature. Yeah. You picked obscure albums from a decade.
These
you
are
don't
not.
know.
I typed in albums of 2010 and basically just wrote down every one that Google suggested to me, which was this list.
We're struggling even with the clues.
I would have rinsed this list, so you know. Nobody.
No.
That's Fleet Foxes. Days Are Gone. Any clues? Anyone want a clue?
I'm thinking I'm just going to sit back and drink a cup of coffee while the rest of this goes on.
They sound a bit like Fleetwood Mac. There's 3 of them. They're all
That just narrows
girls.
it down to like 8%
Sisters.
of the band.
Haim.
Yeah, Haim, yeah.
You didn't say your name.
Didn't say no.
Oh, mate.
He gets it. Someone needs to win some points. Pink Friday. Female rapper. Huge. Larger than life personality.
Nicki Minaj?
It is Nicki Minaj.
I feel better now.
Up All Night.
Ryan, Razorlight.
No. Embarrassing for you, that.
Wasn't that from last decade?
Yeah,
I was going to say, wasn't that the name of one of their albums?
I think it was.
Massive pop band from the past decade. I think they split up now, thank God.
Kirk, One Direction.
It is One Direction. Come Around Sundown. Follow up to a massive album from the previous decade, which was this was a bit of a flop and kind of killed the band off this decade. No one cares about them anymore.
Kirk, Kings of Leon.
Yeah, it's Kings of Leon. Art Pop.
Lady Gaga?
That is Lady Gaga.
Okay.
Keith, you have to get this one.
I'm more than happy at the moment to be scoring
if you
0.
Don't get this one. I'm going to be surprised. Plastic Beach.
That's Keith Gorillas. Yeah. Okay, I got 1 point.
Anti.
As in auntie?
No, as in anti. So you're anti something.
No idea.
Massive.
It sounds vaguely familiar, but
Massive female R&B star that isn't Beyonce. We spoke about her earlier.
Rihanna?
Yeah. Settle.
Are these the biggest selling album?
No, it's just these are apparently like the best albums of the decade.
This guy's Spotify list.
I think Guy needs to use a different search engine.
UK dance duo became big this decade. Probably actually managed to get chart hits, I think, but are quite considered to be good album artists as well. They take us Disclosure.
No way.
Yeah. I've heard the name.
Utopia.
Has that got an exclamation mark at the end?
No.
Okay, it's not the one I thought then.
Kirk, I thought you might have got that one, but no.
Yeah, can't think.
Bjork. Finally, the king. The king of limbs.
Ryan, Radiohead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See if we can get any scores here. Kirk, you got 1, 2, 3, 4. Ryan, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Lee, you got 2. Keith, you got 1.
Well done, Ryan.
Yeah,
well done, Ryan.
Crack band competition.
I think that really sums up the decade in music, doesn't it? Really, the fact that that was a blowout.
The fact that none of those were any of the titles of any of the records on my long list.
The thing is though, I would have rinsed that round, but those were considered the biggest albums of the decade. Some of the biggest albums of the decade. Half of them are rubbish.
Yes.
That is a bad list of
Well, I've not
records.
bought any of those.
Perhaps off air, I'll read out some of the titles of my albums on the long list and see if anybody gets those.
Okay.
The Dubliners, Foster Allen.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Captain Kirk's Vinyl Frontier / Geeky Brummie crossover. Kirk, do you want to explain about your show where you can listen again?
Yeah, well, it's an all vinyl show. It's 2 hours of back-to-back vinyl records, all from my own personal collection. So you get everything from, I know, jazz, classic rock, blues, funk, soul, etc., etc. No Taylor Swift, though, unfortunately. But you never know.
Lend you that record if you want.
Thanks for that, guy. It goes out live the show goes out live, not Taylor Swift, every Friday and Sunday on Rock Radio UK, or if you go to mixcloud.com/Vinyl Frontier UK.
Thank you.
And what goes on your show then, Ryan?
Chaos. Yeah. Every week on a Saturday, usually released. But you can find me, Keith, Lee, Guy, plus other assorted people every week talking about film, TV, best film show in Birmingham, and gaming, comics, anything that tickles your geeky fancy. But just search Geeky Brummie and you'll find us everywhere online.
Thanks for listening.